It's only my pleasure.
Fantastic facility, isn't it? You must be well impressed.
I am very well impressed, but then I'm also an older hand on it. I've been an elections analyst here with the SABC quite a number of times, and the decor changes a little bit, but the basics absolutely the same.
And we bring we'll bring up to the minute results for the rest of the week as things happen here.
Yes, that is exciting.
I wanted to ask you about special votes. They've started today and tomorrow. Just give us your thoughts on the special votes process, how it works, and who are the people that really will be voting.
Yes, yeah, it is, disabled people professionally who will be in a call of duty, for example. Many of the IEC people will be casting special votes, often the elderly and the infirm. And they would have had to apply for these special votes a while ago. And now this is rolling out. Quite a few 100,000 of these votes will be cast across the provinces.
The last couple of days, we've seen massive election rallies, final election rallies it is, all around the country. Just give us your thoughts on what you thought of the run-in to this election.
Yes, the mass race really culmination of huge campaigns. And of course, the parties with big funds or big mobilization network structures on the ground, they are the ones that really pull off mass rallies. So we've really seen a few of the really big ones, the ANC, the DA, and the EFF at Richville. The whole township around the area was infused with the red berets yesterday. But these are the only really big rallies that we saw. Very often parties have small community halls or visits to taxi ranks, walkabouts, and this is where the funding of election campaigns, access of resources really start playing a huge role. And the parties put in their final pitches, but of course it is the end of a whole long campaign. The campaigns were pretty long, so many of them started last year already, and 5 years in between elections, or for new parties a very short run-up to these elections. And so it is not just a campaign, but the imprint they've made on the communities, the anchors, the linkages they have into their communities, all of this will have a big impact on the vote.
And who are the leaders and the political parties, both big and small, that impressed you in the last week with, let's call it clever campaigning, if there is such a thing?
Yes, much of it was very predictable. And with the ANC and the DA, we got more or less what we expected. The ANC really tried to rally around their core constituents. It's not an election which they will expand. So we had to focus on their core existing support to retain that. And their messages showed that. The DA desperately tries to get into that black African vote market that belongs to the ANC. So they imitate themselves in various incarnations of the ANC and their appeals in Musi Maimane premier candidates' appearances and the way he sounds. And the EFF probably, one has to be honest, impressive because they had very little resources, and yet they were very good. Julius Malema obviously is good at capturing media, but they seem to have had a very good media campaign, to be at interesting places and doing things that will capture the attention. So I think the clever campaign award has to go to the EFF. And then many other small parties, it will be there's a big pool of massive small parties. I've mentioned 3 of the big ones. There are 26 others on the national ballot. And for them to make an impact, a few of them broke through with their little rallies. Of course, SABC also had that equality of treatment for small parties, and that helped them. Otherwise, they would never have made it onto the national media.
Jobs and the economic outlook is very much at the heart of this election and seem to be the buzzword that all political parties are tapping into. Who are the parties that have hit the high notes when we're talking jobs and economic development?
Here it really is again the big 3, because their media are all around and they have got resources or just skilled people to come in and talk about it. The big debate in the last week has been between the ANC and the DA, where they have contested each other's statistics, and we know one can do magic, anybody can do magic with statistics. And as much as the ANC was criticizing the DA statistics and the so-called good story of the Western Cape, so much the ANC was also coming and saying, but you are very very selective in your statistics. So both of these parties really speak to this core important issue. But I don't think any of them has really persuaded lots of voters on the basis of their campaign on jobs, job creation, that is, they need to vote for that party because that is what they say about jobs. It was more these parties giving notice to the voters. We know that this is the issue. Trust us, we will address it.
Yeah. What are the surprises that's in store that people maybe are not thinking about on election day and when the results come out on Thursday? Could it be a scenario like in the Western Cape where the ANC is running the DA a lot closer, I think, than people expected if one looks at the polls?
Well, that would be a big surprise if that is the case, because the polls so far seem to give a bigger edge to the DA in that province. But then perhaps the ANC does come out and rally those communities, but it's going to be a tough one for the ANC in the Western Cape, because their typical constituents are not very well registered. A bit like the EFF's younger voters, that is, their core constituents, are really not registered to that extent. But a big surprise could be also that category of the small parties, and whether the Sidikewe appeal by Ronnie Caswell and his associates could breathe new life into the small parties, a big pool of small parties that has to break through to even just get into parliament.
I want to take the discussion a little bit wide and talk about leadership. Leadership should be a key ingredient come election time. But are we a country that's obsessed with leaders rather than leadership?
Oh, that is so true. You know, the focus is really just on those people, top people, and the parties pitch them as the ultimate heroes. Never mind whether they are the ultimate heroes and really good leadership-giving leaders. Leadership has really not been great. It's very often opportunistic when it comes to the opposition parties, and when it comes to the ANC, we very often see glossed over serious issues of lack of leadership, but the great leader is there. And then, of course, often voters vote for the parties rather than for the leaders, perhaps because the leaders have not been really inspirational. What
about leaders that have made little errors in the run-up to the election? We've seen political parties try and merge. We've seen, you mentioned a little bit earlier about the DA really chasing the so-called black vote here in South Africa. Has that been a faux pas? Do you get a sense that they might have alienated some of their constituency, being the more conservative groupings within South Africa's populace?
I think your question goes to the heart of the current problems of the DA. There is a growing constituency, absolutely. It is an expansion phase. It remains in one, even if its support is likely to be very much on par with what they had in the 2011 local elections. Yeah. But it's that internal contradictions between old and middle liberal and the new, more nationalist type of supporters. And that is going to come through in the leadership contest in that party. Leadership contests in all of the parties actually suggest that post-election we're going to have a lot of instability in these parties. The ANC is set to come up for rotation or renewal or changes in leadership very soon. The EFF is a new party that has not had its formal conferences to constitute a leadership formally, and that makes for a lot of instability in the meantime.
Finally, Professor, I want to talk to you about free and fair elections here in South Africa. We always have been. We've been a beacon of light for the rest of the world when we look at our historical context, where we come from, the kind of free and fair elections that we've had in the past. This time around, are we suffering issues of political intolerance and violence that are threatening the future of this election?
We have seen so much of it, but it's very interesting. I think it's also sometimes over-exaggerated, because it's small communities, enclaves. We see the hotspots in South Africa. It's a handful. We know that they've reduced, but very interesting. We see the security people who really should stay far away, really stay in the background in elections. But we see them trying to take a forefront position to show people we are present. We know much low-level intimidation. Halls have been occupied by contesting opposition parties. Big stadia have been denied to some parties so that they cannot easily launch their campaigns. And people inside communities feel that other community leaders are watching them, so they should perhaps not show these and these deviating political colors.
Yeah.
So there is a sense that it's not all really equal and fair, even if by the end of the day it's largely likely to be judged free and fair.
Thank you very much for joining us. Political analyst, Professor Susan Booysen, giving us her views on, well, I hope we'll have a free and fair election, but thank you for joining us once again.
Sufficiently free and fair.
Thank you, Professor Booysen. She'll be with us throughout the week, giving you her insights, unique insights, though, about, well, election 2014. She's covered a few elections with the SABC before and will continue to do so.